actually a little lost. We still can't figure.
Good morning. Do you want me to start?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, right. So I want to thank you so much for inviting me today at this conference. The word inspirational, I always find a bit, you know, I'm English and it doesn't, it's sort of like, ooh, no, that's not me. But what is inspirational? What made me write a book? I suppose when I discovered my children had been sexually abused by my friend and my boss, my 3 boys, I was absolutely frozen with fear, disbelief, and I couldn't process those emotions. And that sort of then it became anger, real anger, and that anger I felt was so scary. It had a real energy about it that, to be honest, it just put everything else that I thought had been anger, it had just put that into, well, they were moments of frustration, moments of temper when I couldn't get my own way. This anger was like a laser. And then that turned into a real passion of how do I protect other children, other schools, other mothers, other teachers from falling foul to this awful crime of sexual abuse of children and the grooming, which is of course the precursor to it. So I had to wait a very long time. England is not like America. You know, I had to wait 9 months before I could see a therapist. And I thought, this is just ridiculous. I will have taken my own life by then. And in fact, I had attempted that. But I started doing what I think is something I totally believe in. I think the trouble is, as you've just been talking about Twitter and emails, do you know what I think is gone from our world is the sheer joy of receiving a handwritten letter in your letterbox. And I find that really, even now, something magical, you know, because they're normally bills, aren't they, that you have to pay. But to get a letter, a handwritten envelope, you think, ooh, who's written me that, you know. And so I'm a massive fan of writing emotions down. So I wrote this book. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it? I wrote this book called Never Take No for an Answer. And I didn't know it was going to be a book. I just started writing all my emotions down that I couldn't process. They were all so jumbled. And what I did was I called every chapter one of those emotions. And I started off with the joys of motherhood, because it starts off, let me read you the very first opening paragraph where I mention, you know, my children. It was just amazing. In the first paragraph, it just comes with a moment I actually met my children's abuser. And he tapped me on my shoulder to say what a nice mum I was. And at that time, my boy, son now, who's 38, he was then 2. And I had yet to have my daughter, who I was pregnant with, and then my twins, and who he then went on to abuse. But it goes the way through, you know, the realization, the painful realization in chapter 6, when I actually discovered that I was going to have to face this as a reality, that this man had stood in a court and said he was guilty. And then the denial. How could he have done that? How does anybody do that? That's bizarre. And then the awful feeling of betrayal, that this had been my best friend. He had been my best friend for 17 years, my confidant and my supporter. And when I was going through my divorce, he was that man, that very, very attentive friend. And of course, what he was doing, I now realize, was grooming me to get to my children. And the awful feelings of guilt, terrible feelings of guilt, that was it my fault? And I spent a long time trying to deal with that. I think that was the last of the emotions to go. And I even couldn't release that feeling of guilt until, oh my goodness, maybe only 2 years ago, actually, when this was then 2016, I think the guilt finally went when I realized that all my children, because I have a daughter as well, and she suffered a lot knowing that her brothers had been sexually abused. And she sort of kind of blamed me, because she said, I told you that mum was a creep. I told you that man was a creep. I know he was my headmaster, but I told you I didn't like him. And all you did was make me write letters of apology to him, Mum, which I did. And she said, I knew there was something wrong. So for a time, she actually blamed me because I didn't listen to her. And it was only really in 2016, I thought, well, all the boys are now okay. They're married. They've got lovely wives. They've got wonderful jobs. In fact, one of the twins, he now works as an actuary in New York. So, but once they got all their careers sorted and all their exams, I then thought, phew, they're now all where I always dreamed and hoped and prayed they would be. So that took a very long time. But going back to 2004, how I actually came to terms with this, along with writing this book, and how I challenged the courts, because he walked away from court basically a free man. He had a suspended sentence and a £200 fine, and he'd been head teacher of a Church of England school and had abused more than my children, several other boys as well, across his time in other counties in England. But then I spent time thinking, well, how does anybody do this? So in the time that I was waiting to have my therapy, and I wrote my book because I found that extremely cathartic, and so many mums who are non-abusing parents who have found their children sexually abused have bought this off Amazon. And I'm really proud that it wasn't just to make it cathartic for me, it actually positively helped other mums going forward, and realizing that the emotions and the horrific emotions that they go through were actually normal. It is what you go through. I think that one of the hardest things for me as well was any of that friendship with me, was any of it true? Was any of it, did any of it mean anything? I mean, of course, I will never know, will I really? But, you know, but then when I went around, I wrote 2 books, actually. When I went around talking to all these people who manage offenders, and I stepped back, having spoken to them, I got lots of information from researchers and professors, and people were inordinately kind to me, because a lot of people had touched base with me and contacted me, because what I did when this man walked away from court, I challenged it, and I took it to our Attorney General. I took it to the Lord Chancellor, who was in charge of all our judges in the country, and I said, this can't be right. There's no way this man how can he possibly walk away with just this sentence when he sexually abused boys? How can that be right? So I had no money for lawyers, and I wrote to the Attorney General, and I appealed that this has to be unduly lenient. So he called up the papers of the case, and that was in the June of 2004, following on from the magistrates' courts in the April of 2004. I was so angry. And he said, you're right, this is unduly lenient, and I am going to raise it at the High Court of Appeal, which is the building you see time and again on world news when cases go wrong. And I could not believe it. I sat there in this court with my boys and my husband, my second husband, Roger, who helped me so much, and with Harriet Harman, who's a name that's known around the world. And after the hammer came down and he said, yes, you're going to receive a conviction in prison, I thought, gosh, I've won. I've actually won. And that was it. So this book I have now also written. It's a book for guidance for mums and teachers, and it's been, we're reprinting it. We've had to reprint it so many times, but it's a guidance book, and this book is actually in the British Library, and I'm really, really proud of it. It's the guidelines for identifying and managing the issues created by grooming and the sexual abuse of children up to the age of 16 rather, and it covers the problems of the abuser, the issues for adults who are abused as children, and how that manifests itself. And from that, and I would love to come over to California, from this now, I have actually been working very hard on courses. And we do all manner of courses now that focus on grooming online, grooming offline, the issues of the offender. And in fact, I'm shortly releasing a video of my actual training that we do, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'm so pleased that a very wealthy, well-known chocolate brand in the UK gave me a grant. And so what we're hoping now is that we can carry on doing our face-to-face training, which is coming. My goodness me, we get disclosures, we get so much that we can hand to the police, and that will then follow on with this training course to train in new people, new staff when they come on, and parents. So we would love to come into schools in California and do this unique training. It's very unique. I demonstrate grooming, and we sell the books, and we sell all sorts of stuff that, but it's not about that. It's about grooming operates exactly the same way. I go into prisons, I talk to these people, and across the globe, we've trained in Serbia, we've trained right across Europe, but we would love to break into California. And the blueprint of grooming is the same. It's not something that's a culture. It's not something it's a human condition that is the same all around the world. So it would work exactly the same way with those offenders in America as it does here. So I can't thank you enough. So if there's any questions, please ask me.
So thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Of course, Winona has a question. Anyone else have any questions?
No one.
What's in the what? Oh, yeah.
Well, I have personal experience with having been molested, and my mother actually, it took 3 times before she took action and took him to the police. And the abuse went on for 5 years. What programs do you have in place to help women learn to get off denial and stop, ignoring the signs that they see?
Well, I think that's
themselves.
I think that's the point. Our training is so. I was doing one yesterday, and a teacher there said to me, "Oh my gosh, that's real fist in your face training," and it is. I say time and again on radio, I do a lot, that the most important thing is a mother must believe your child. You must believe. And I think that's why my boys survived, because I believed them. I never put the other relationship before my child. And I think that's a message that has to keep on going out there. You must believe your child. In England, we have Ofsted. I don't know, have the inspections that go around schools. And they do now have a thing called the voice of the child must be heard. And I think it's one of these crimes where you have to believe it. And that perpetrator is the wrong way round, but is guilty until they're proven innocent, because children do not make this up. Children under the age of 7 cannot make up these graphic stories. They have either seen it on pornographic films or they've experienced it. They do not have the facility to invent this. And I feel really sad for you that your mum, however And it's terrible. It's abuse all over again. If your mother can't believe you and won't believe you, that is so stressful and debilitating and painful, almost rejection. And I really feel for you. I mean, she obviously believed it in the end and went to police, but that's not the point. You know, the first shout should have been the one that she listened to. And I don't think people understand enough how important it is that the mother, even more than the father, that the mother believes their child. And I'm always banging that drum. Always. It's so important.
Well, the amazing thing to me is that she walked in when I was 5, a year after this starts, and he's teaching us to French kiss in front of her.
Oh,
and,
for goodness sake.
Like, it doesn't click with her then that she should have booted him out the door.
What was the relationship she had with him again?
This was my stepfather, and
I do you know what? I've had a similar case in Scotland, in England, where this has happened as well. You see, I sometimes think the women, and I don't know what your situation was like at that time, but I think sometimes there's a real fear with the woman of what's going to happen. And I've had a very similar case in Scotland recently, where very similar thing happened. She walked in and saw this man molesting her daughter. The daughter was 14 and molesting her under the duvet in the child's own bedroom. And the mother was the same. Even though she's seen it, she still will not believe it happened. And she has maintained the relationship with the stepfather, but has totally lost her daughter. And of course, that is the price these women pay. You know, why would you, as a daughter, I mean, respect goes out the window, doesn't it? You know, it goes right out the window. And there's, you know, you may always respect the fact she's your mother, but do you end up loving your mother as you should? Because that is the ultimate betrayal from your mother. I find that astonishing. I really, my heart goes out to you. I find that absolutely astonishing. There it was in her face. Goodness me. What didn't she get?
Marylyn, we have another question over here. Do you feel that your words, your literary words, have done more, or your in-person speaking have done more to change the tide and finally get you that grant?
I think it's a bit of both. I think the whole thing was a timeline. I wrote my book out of sheer anger to help me process my own emotions, and then I realized I'd done something good for other mothers. Then I thought, hang on, you're a teacher, you know, put this together. And then it was my husband that said, write this booklet, you know, and we've sold it to the police. We've sold thousands of them, and and that's being revamped. And then I thought, right, you're a teacher, you're used to standing on your feet. So all you're thinking of, you're going to put a workshop or a program together, then all I'm doing is basically a massive, great lesson plan. And that's how it's grown, and it's grown, and it's grown, and it's grown. So big is it now that we've had to divide it up into sections. So some schools want a whole day, and we now go into big organizations, big corporations in the lunch times to talk to young parents that have had to put their children into childminding and stuff. I think it's a process of everything, because once I stand on my feet and talk, I can reference these books as well, and people do order them. And I've also done an awful lot of documents and handouts to support the training. I do a lot of research. In fact, I do it during the summer holidays. That's when I do a lot of my research work. But I think I do a lot of visuals when I'm training. Now, when you are delivering training, when you're a teacher, you understand that people are either passive learners, active learners, and visual learners. And I don't think you can put a value on visual learning. So I have a great big teddy bear that I sit on my lap and I groom him. I have volunteers from the audience who become that teddy bear's family. And then we play these games of how I groom the family and I groom the friends. And everybody at the end of that understands grooming. And it is so easy to spot once you understand it. And I think it's not something finite. I was laying many years ago now. I was lying in bed awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, how do I get people to understand grooming? I thought the only way I can do it is to demonstrate it. So I have this. Let me show you my teddy. He goes on flights with me. He comes. There he goes. Look at him. See, meet Joe. And he has a special suitcase that comes with me when I go abroad on trips. He has his own suitcase. Can't exactly buy him a flight on an airline seat, but he comes, and I get some very funny looks if I'm asked to open my luggage. But it works. That visual imagery of talking down this teddy bear's ears and touching him. And of course, these people groom in plain sight. They do it to normalize their behaviors. And of course, I spent 17 years watching this man play. I know how to do it, and I train all our consultants to do it as well. And you know, you can take a little look on YouTube. You'll see quite a lot of me put in Marylyn Halls and the teddy bear. He's sort of become my signature, really. But you have to, it's been very successful. We have disclosures every course we do. The other day I was in a primary school and I was doing online grooming. I had 27 young children from the age of 10, 8 years old, queuing up with disclosures of what they'd experienced online. It's very powerful. Have I finished?
This has been a presentation at the Inspirational Women in Literature Conference 2018 presented by the Anti-Thought Ladies.